Thank you, Ashish. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining us here today. We have a big target in front of us. India wants to become Viksit by 2047. Simultaneously, we have committed ourselves to net zero by 2070. So I want to begin by asking each one of you, can rapid economic growth, that's what we want, and decarbonization truly go hand in hand? Let's start with you.
Yeah, thank you so much. And congratulations to the team Times for this wonderful event. Well, when we talk about decarbonization, I think the time is up. And speaking about whether it goes hand in hand, I think it's no longer a choice or option. It's a must-do thing, whether you pick up energy sector or the industrial energy systems or even mobility for that matter. And as the recent geopolitical situation has already taught us, or a wake-up call given to us as a country, that you got to secure your own energy independence. And as we just heard Sumant saying that we don't have fossil fuels. It is true, by the way. 89% of our energy needs are imported. Then what option do we have? The option as a country is to take the path of a carbon-free, sources of energy. That's only not an option, but that's the only source we have, right? So having said that, I think it's an initiative that's already been taken by the government, by the various stakeholders, industry players, policymakers, financing guys, everybody, to make the decarb happen. And I think we're seeing several sectors where we are seeing the what you call as electrification of everything or many of the things around us. And I think the path is just getting clearer day by day. Yep. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you so much for inviting me. So I would like to state very clearly that I think this is the time where India can really lead the innovation part also in the context of sustainability. So I'm coming from a sector which cools the whole India or the world. So in one way we can say that cooling maybe will deter the overall sustainability. But I would say like the developed countries, they already having lot many issues with the retrofitting and all those things. But India as a country where the penetration of air conditioners is just around 7 to 10%, and we have huge opportunity to really develop those sustainable cooling solutions which can not only help us to attain those targets which has been set by globally, but we can make efficient products which can be really helpful for the overall market. Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks for having me. So if we look at our oil dependence, import dependence has touched 90%. So it's not far-fetched to say that oil is India's biggest vulnerability from an energy security standpoint. And if we look at the Indian market, it's a growing economy. We have one of the fastest growth. We're clocking that. But that growth is accompanied by a commensurate demand for electricity and energy. And that's where sustainability comes in. So not just from the point of view of going green, but also from an affordability standpoint. And that is something we are seeing when we are injecting more and more renewable energy. And in the previous panel, we also heard views on that. It's the newer renewable energy sources, even clubbed with storage, it's cheaper than thermal. And anyways cheaper than oil. So which is why it's also an affordable transition. The good part is the developments we are seeing are all positive. So from an electricity standpoint, last year we saw a capacity addition of almost 55 gigawatt, highest ever. Solar addition was close to 44, double of what we saw or what we witnessed in the previous year. If we look at from a mobility standpoint also, last month, which is June 26, we saw an EV sales of 3 lakh, which has been the highest ever any month in India's history. And looking at 25 lakh vehicle sale, almost 12.6% of that penetration is now from electric vehicles. So we are seeing positive developments, and that's really comforting from a transition standpoint.
Interesting. So things are definitely looking better. There is an opportunity, but what do we do with that opportunity is the big question. Let's be more sector specific now, as far as startup hour is concerned. Now, in one of the discussions that we had just now, the focus was that, India has got big storage ambitions, but grid modernization is something that's the need of the hour. So how do we really do that?
So, so there are two aspects to this question. First is how do we pump in electricity which the grid can absorb? So, reducing that intermittency and then having a grid that's better prepared. So, from that point of view, it's mostly renewable energy sources which are not just plain solar or wind directly generating, but clubbed with pumped storage or battery storage. And last year we have seen record high tendering for battery storage. PSP also, we have just seen one of the recent tenders closing in. So that way, increasingly it's going to be more and more firm sources of energy injecting within that grid. At Tata Power, we are not doing anything specifically different. What we are doing is we are adapting with the sector needs. So the newer bids, the newer trajectory has been hybridization with multiple sources, firming up with battery storage. So we have a battery portfolio. We have a pumped storage. We have a couple of pumped storage projects actually coming up. So the intent is to supply that round-the-clock electricity or dispatchable electricity to not just utilities, but to also various commercial and industrial consumers. So, for example, to data centers, to various energy guzzlers. So that way, we were just trying to see what India is going to be needing and catering to that.
One argument was that our grid is not strong enough, and also renewable capacity, while it is growing rapidly, grid stability is also a big concern. Is that the next big challenge for you?
Looking at the science, I'll agree. We have close to 40 gigawatt unsigned capacity that's primarily stranded because of transmission that has not kept pace with the generation that's coming up. From the point of view of localization also, we are seeing that increasingly happening. For example, large capacity is coming up in Khavda. We saw tripping happening there. So almost 9 gigawatt was curtailed at that point. So I'll say grid happens to be one key constraint where a lot has to happen. The good part is we have a lot of battery energy storage capacity coming up at state level. So a lot of these states have carried out tenders, and a lot of that capacity is currently at various stages of implementation. So with that coming in, we believe it's going to be a much robust grid infrastructure that will be in place.
Okay. Vikas, now cooling demand in India is also expected to surge dramatically. That's what many reports are suggesting over the next decade specifically. How do we meet that demand without significantly compromising, on the emissions target that we have?
So the beauty is that I think we have already cost 10 million units, and in the next 5 years, I think we are going to double the demand for the air conditioners. But we had an India Cooling Action Plan, which talks about that you have to reduce the cooling demand by 20 to 25%. You have to reduce the refrigerants from 25 to 30%, and then you have to reduce overall cooling efficiency, as in the product needs to be more efficient, from 25 to 40%. So I think all the air conditioning manufacturers along with us, we are on the targets, and we really feel that the era is for that we need to give sustainable cooling, and with this thing going on, all the companies are working on primarily 3 parameters. One is that you are working on more energy efficient products. Second is that you are using more on the AI side or the digitization side. And third is that you are just trying to see what could be the other ways of using different refrigerants which are having low global warming potential, so that the product becomes more efficient and it is more sustainable, and the duration or the life cycle of the product is much more than the expectation, so that you don't have that sustainability issues can be catered in that.
You spoke about sustainable cooling. Can energy efficient cooling, if I would like to call it that, become a business advantage rather than just an obligation?
No, it's not an obligation. Frankly speaking, whatever AC used to be there 10 years back, I think it has become almost 60% more efficient as on today. And the beauty is that the Bureau of Energy, BE, they just keep on upgrading those standards. They are publishing every 2 years. Our product has become more and more energy efficient. But the irony is that the 5-star product, just 10 to 15 percent penetration of those products is there. But yeah, definitely energy efficient products are there in the market, and it's not mere obligation. We all are committed that we have to develop those products. But yeah, the market demand, as I told you, for the 5-star products is just around 15% or so.
Okay. Let's talk about the EV infrastructure in this country, because every time there is a conversation around somebody wanting to buy an electric vehicle, the argument is, where is the infrastructure really? So how will you like to respond to that argument? Consumers often say that EV charging infrastructure is still the biggest hurdle. Where are we and where do we plan to go?
So I think this is a subject like air conditioning touches our lives every day, either in corporate or at home. Speaking about e-mobility adoption, is largely a function of availability of products, and now you have probably more than 30 different electric cars available in the market. Similarly, in two-wheelers, three-wheelers, and also large format commercial vehicles as well. Now, speaking about the second function is the function of the availability of charging infrastructure, akin to what you call petrol pumps or gas stations. Now, to begin with, in the personal mobility segment or in electric car adoption, and one of the things, as Vaibhav just mentioned, last month, for the first time, more than 6% of cars sold in India have been electric. Now, all said and done, it's clear that if there is sufficient EV charging infrastructure per se, the adoption is likely to grow more. But on the personal mobility, I must say one thing, just go ahead, and this is for all the audience over here, just go and blindly buy an electric car if you wish to. And the reason is, you have better batteries coming up, so there are better range on a single charge, number one. Number two, India already has more than 30,000 charging points which are fast charging. Right? And I'm not referring to AC chargers which are at community workplaces or at corporate buildings or at home. I'm referring to public charging points which enables intercity mobility. Now, as my company ChargeZone, we are on the forefront in terms of enabling intercity mobility. That's how we started in 2019. And currently we command a network of around 16,000 charging points. We serve roughly 500,000 customers on a monthly basis. And these 500,000 customers are actually 80% of the cars on the road as on date. And I'm talking about both personal mobility as well as the fleet operators. But having said that, let's speak about what government is doing in this year. And the best thing that government has honestly stayed out of as far as the governance is concerned in terms of the guidelines, safety regulations. They had designed it in 2018-19, much ahead of time. And today, the only piece that MHI has brought in is another 2,000 crore of a subsidy, marginal subsidy, I would say, or viability gap funding on the upstream side, that is on the power infra side. But having said that, companies like us, ChargeZone, and there is Tata Power, there's GeoBP and others as well, who have been rolling out charging points across the highways, across the cities and so on. But today, you can actually drive from Amritsar to Chennai. You can drive from Kolkata to Ahmedabad without any range anxiety.
Wow.
This is a reality.
This is new.
And we have customers driving 600, 700 kilometers in a day. It's a stretch without any range anxiety. The only thing we are now solving is the speed anxiety. In other words, moving from fast chargers to superchargers, which allows a user to charge his or her car within, let's say, 20 minutes or 15 minutes. Yeah. So charging infra is gradually picking up space, and well, still we need roughly at least $5 billion in terms of infra on the fast or superchargers network building as well. Yeah.
Okay. Now, you're saying that, now we are moving towards the next phase as far as charging infrastructure is concerned. But if I ask you what needs to immediately happen for EV charging to become as convenient and as reliable as, say, refueling a conventional, traditional way?
I think the immediate need is, as I said, superchargers. So supercharger definition is generally 240 kilowatt and above. It's called a supercharger, right? And the capex is obviously intense. Typically, doing a 7.4 AC charger at home will cost $40,000, while a 240 kilowatt charger is starts at 1 crore plus. And it's not the cost of charger, but also the upstream infrastructure, including the transformers, new load connection from DISCOM, the civil works you got to do, and then so on. However, with the supercharging network gradually increasing, will mean that you will still be spending roughly 15 to 20 minutes for charging on a highway. which coincides with, let's say, a break that you want to take for a coffee or for a masala dosa, for example. But at the end of the day, what we have seen is a shift in the use case. So on the personal mobility side, we have seen that a customer, once he buys an EV, we have seen that every 45th day, there is one EV owner visiting our public charging network, every 45th day. In other words, we don't use car for business purpose, or do we? I don't drive from Mumbai to Ahmedabad using a car. I take a flight or maybe a train at max. But generally, I will take a car for some personal visits or for some pilgrimage or for some touristy thing. So this has actually been the use case in our country, and EV kind of sweetly coincides with that. So in a way, personal mobility is largely solved, as I said, the better battery and better improved range as well. But now let's address the elephant in the room, and that's on the commercial fleet. And I'm not referring to taxis. I'm referring to electric buses for intercity applications as well as electric trucks. And as you have seen recently in some of the news channels, you will observe, or you will be coming across the adoption of electric trucks. And I'm not talking about 1 tonner or 2 tonner. I'm talking about a 55 tonner use case. My other venture, Billion Electric Mobility, we already have 150 electric trucks. All of them are 55 tonners running for various customers for steel applications, cement applications and all. And they do not have any use case doing home charging. They got to do a pit stop at a supercharging hub or super hub in a city or outside the city on a highway. Now, this is a very different ballgame that is coming across as a huge challenge in terms of electric mobility adoption for the country or for the market in general.
Okay. Vikas, what is, you spoke about opportunity in the beginning. What is that one policy intervention you think that's the need of the hour, given the times that we are in? There are global uncertainties, there are wars, conflicts, nobody really knows what is going to happen tomorrow. That also leads to supply chain disruptions. And then what happens to our overall targets and also the sustainability path that we would want to embark on?
Frankly speaking, government has already done on their part. So there is a QCO, Quality Council. So based on that, earlier most of the air conditioners used to be imported from China. So what they really did is that they asked that you need to get a BIS certificate in case you want to use that particular component in your product. So what has happened, I think the localization has almost reached around 80 to 85%, and it's maybe going towards 100%. So I think in the supply chain resilience, I think that point has been catered. There were few components like compressors and many other electronics things which were usually imported from China or so, but now those factories have also been established over here in India. So I think in the sustainability context, everything is fine. In the PLI scheme, basically, a lot of manufacturing hubs have come up in City City, primarily in the HVAC domain. I would suggest that one intervention which government can really do is in the context of 5-star, because on one hand, the manufacturers are asked to make an energy efficient product. Every 2 years, you have to make it more efficient. But ultimately, the buyers are not there who really, because ideally, if I have a 5-star air conditioner, almost the penetration should at least be 50% or so. So I think there is a huge opportunity of policy intervention in that. Secondly, as I told you, almost 60 to 70% the products are more efficient, which it used to be 10 years or 8 years back. So there's a huge opportunity for the retrofitting of those products so that it can be really helpful and reduce the overall energy demand. So I think these are the three key aspects.
Vaibhav, now if I ask you to say identify one technology that could transform India's decarbonization journey by 2035 in your sector, what would that really be? So one policy intervention perhaps that you think is the need of the hour, because we want to embark on this journey of grid modernization as well. We've got ambitious targets for energy storage too that Honorable Minister spoke about in the morning. So how do we do that?
Yeah. So the answer to both, in my opinion, would be storage. And we have to also shift from a subsidy-based ecosystem or a subsidy-based support to an ecosystem-enabled growth. How that has to happen is, for example, if you look at mobility, we already have FAME that used to provide capital subsidy on the final product. We had vehicles that had some subsidy coming in through PLI. batteries that go into, and we have a PLI for ACC or battery manufacturing as well. And at state level, there have been various incentives. So on that part, manufacturing has been coming up. What has to also happen is for that ecosystem to come up. So specifically for say battery storage, we are still reliant a lot on China for these batteries to get imported. Assembly has started to happen. We have various assemblers. However, the cell assembly is still lacking. So what has to happen is for that integration to happen, we also start manufacturing cells. Subsequently, even ancillaries have to start getting manufactured here in India. If we cover manufacturing, then there are other aspects to it. For example, say testing and standardization. If currently we are assembling a container, a battery packs, we would still have to send it to China for testing, because I mean that testing apparatus and that infrastructure is still missing. So the entire ecosystem has to come into place for us to be completely self-sufficient.
So what's the solution to that point that you made? How can we reduce reliance on China? Should we look at maybe diversifying the way we've done it for energy after West Asia crisis happened? I mean, what is the way forward in that?
So it has to be the entire value chain that has to happen, because even if there are certain vulnerabilities, we would still end up depending on China. So taking again the learnings from say solar. So we have solar modules that are being manufactured. We have solar cell that are starting to get manufactured a lot more. Wafer and ingot is starting to come up. We have announcement that have happened. But polysilicon would be the last stage left, which also would have to be covered. Same in terms of ancillary goods. You have glass, you have EVA, you have frames and a lot of that. So that has to start happening here completely. So that we will have to stop that dependence on China altogether. The second part is R&D, which has to keep pace. Right now what happens is predominantly China would lead that technology development, the commercialization part, and once something is proven, then eventually we'll get in the capital goods and machinery. The assembly lines would also get outrightly imported from China and other countries, but we would be assembling it here on a larger scale. And that's where we feel our specialization is, manufacturing on a larger scale with labor cost and everything coming into picture. And what has to happen is for that lead time to reduce. So if perovskites, for example, have to be happening, we should be right now actively investing into R&D so that the lead time from R&D till commercialization is going down. So that way we'll be a lot more up to date in the market in terms of say, efficiency, in terms of other aspects. And this can be replicated across technologies. So lithium ion, for example, that has to happen. Now sodium-based chemistries are coming in. We still have not started much R&D on that. So that way, all of these aspects would have to fall into place for us to be completely
A bigger focus on R&D is also something that's important. That's an important takeaway. Any thoughts on this, Karthikeyan?
I think, sometimes I think we got overwhelmed by solving this China problem, right? I think we are part of, and everybody's a part of a very large global industrial ecosystem now, right? I think it's more to do with innovation and localization. If I'm dependent upon gold for $72 billion of imports, then what are we talking about in terms of dependency or imports from China? Okay? However, speaking about e-mobility, there is certain thing on the rare earth for motors, or for that matter, the cells for the mobility batteries or automotive batteries. Now, the localization is one path, and on the other side, continuous R&D innovation of making, let's say, motors, which are the second most important part of all the components are important, but the motor is the second most in terms of value to be let's say free from rare earth. Now we have seen ANRF and many such initiatives by the government, which also has prioritized mobility or EV mobility as a topmost sector where innovation-led focus is now coming into being. Now having said that, let's see the all format of electric mobility in the country. We have seen a huge amount of localization under the PLI scheme and other things, which has led two-wheelers and three-wheelers in terms of demand and production volume going through the roof now. And we have seen cars, barring one or two OEM names, you see most of the models available, most of the OEMs have launched their electric cars in the country. And coming to the buses and trucks, well, it's all available if you want to buy one. But having said that, it's only limited to just a couple of components into the EV drivetrain, which is to be innovated. Because India has led just like applied electrical engineering on the energy side, we have seen a huge innovation in automobile for the last 30, 40 years. And 25 years ago, when a visitor from Europe will come, and when I say, well, this Toyota Innova is manufactured in India, they were surprised. Nobody was ready to believe 25 years ago. Today, I don't think there's even a conversation anymore. So same is applicable now to the modern age electric vehicle industry, especially the four-wheelers and above, where innovation will lead to self-reliance. But as I said, that we need not be worried to solve too many things about this Chinese angle. Instead, let's focus on what best products we can build, keeping in mind the global supply chains, as well as keeping in mind that one thing for sure, when I use diesel, it smokes out. If I use lithium-ion battery, the lithium stays back. Correct? I don't smoke out lithium. You can recycle it, and you can bring a lot of new ideas around a circular economy that we all know about. So, if you lead if you actually start seeing from a different lens, I think the problems are more inherent, and innovation is more important, inherent to solve for, rather than thinking about more on the geopolitical side.
Interesting. I think we got some good ideas as well from people who are working in different sectors, because decarbonization is the need of the hour for us to become Viksit by 2047. Karthikeya, Vaibhav, Vikas, thank you very much for joining us here today.